Hi, I'm David Muchler, and this is the big picture of using MQTT in Engineering 120. We want our laptop, that is what we'll call our PC, and our Pico to talk to each other. I'm going to start by showing you an example of some code running. Here's session 22, EngD MQTT Part 2, and there are a bunch of folders here, but here these first two are an example. So there's an example of the code for the PC, an example of the code for the Pico. Let's run the PC code first, so main on PC. I'm going to go ahead and run that. That brings up a window over here that has a place for the human to type in something, a button, and then a label where some data will appear. So we can go ahead and type in here something here. And when I press the button, that sends a message, sending a message hello, to the Pico. Now the Pico isn't yet running, so nothing's happening on the Pico side yet. But the message was sent to the broker, and the broker then forwarded it to the Pico if the Pico had been running and subscribed. Eventually, the Pico will send some information back and it'll show up there. All right, let's then turn to the Pico side. That is up here. And so this is the Pico code. And here's our serial window here. So it shows us what's happening here. And I can I plugged in the Pico. You can tell that because if I go over to look at my files, I see over here that I've got CircuitPy running here. CircuitPy is there, so I've plugged in the Pico. And I've already put in the relevant files onto the Pico. We'll see them later. If I then do Control D here, that starts up the thing. Now it's attempting to connect to my phone as a use of Wi-Fi. Now it didn't connect, so I'm going to go ahead and just get my phone out again and try it again. So it often takes several tries. Sometimes you have to turn the hotspot off and on again, so I've just done that on my phone. And I'm trying to get it to connect again. Now it looks like it might connect this time. So it's attempting to connected to the Wi-Fi via my phone. It says it's the Pico talking to the PC, and it's now connected to the broker, connecting to the broker, and it's now subscribed to this topic. So the PC publishes to this topic, the Pico subscribes to this topic and gets messages. It just prints that the button is not yet pressed. I have a couple of wires attached to it, and these wires are ready to be pressed to simulate a button. So watching over here carefully, let's first send the hello message. So over here we sent hello, and there it is. It received hello. Didn't do anything with it, but it sent hello. Now, if I cross the two wires, you can't see me doing, but I just did so. I'm sending a simulated button push. I'm still continuing to hold it, so it said it several times, and each time that message gets there. So there's button pushed 5. Here I'm holding it again, and that message button is pushed 6, and then later button is pushed 7 are sent and recorded over here. So you can see that messages are going from the Pico to the PC, and from the PC, you can see that messages are going from the Pico to the PC, and from the PC to the Pico. Finally, I want to show a message that does something. If I type in blink over here and send that message, it actually blinks the Pico. You can't see it, but my Pico is now blinking. So that's the big picture of how these things are communicating, showing you an example. So we've now seen an example. Let's look at the code. Remember that what we've got here is multiple devices connected to each other, in our case 2 devices, a PC and a Pico. And one of the devices publishes a message, sends a message to the broker, and does so to a topic. It publishes to a topic. Anything subscribed to that same topic, the broker forwards the message to. So the PC publishes to a message, it publishes to a topic that the Pico is subscribed to, and vice versa. So we have to have code that implements this MQTT protocol I just described. We've got a file here that is the helper file on the PC, and another one for the Pico, because we've got to have code running on the PC and different code running on the Pico. You've got to write code on the PC that uses the MQ helper PC, that library there, which is built on top of something called PAHO MQT, and then code on the Pico that uses the MQT helper Pico file, which is built on top of Adafruit's mini MQTT. Now, there are 4 things that your code needs to do on the PC, and the Pico is similar, but I'm going to describe the PC side. So first of all, if we look at the code here, here's main. You've got to create in main a MQTT client, and that is a thing that, when it's constructed, says what it's communicating from the PC to the Pico, and it sets up topics based on the strings here. So anyhow, this is the thing that's used for communication. That's the first thing you need, is an MQTT client, and it's using the helper PC file. Then you also need, in this case, a graphical, a GUI object. In the case of the PC, it could be anything, but we're going to use a GUI object. So here it is getting constructed, called GUI. And notice that the MQTT client is passed along to the GUI object, so the GUI can store a reference to the MQTT client and later use it to send and receive messages. We'll see that shortly. Also, the MQTT client sets as the dispatcher the GUI, so that means that the MQTT client will have a reference to the GUI, and so when the MQTT client receives a message, it's going to forward that message to, or we use the word dispatch, the message to the GUI, who then deals with the message. But this is steps 1, making the MQTT client. Step 2, making the GUI and having the MQTT client know it. Then, when the GUI wants to send messages, so let's look at the code on the GUI. Here's the code on the GUI. When it wants to send a message, like when the button is pressed, it just takes the MQTT client that it's stored, self.mqtt client, stored in an instance variable, and calls the MQTT client send message, sending it the message, send message method, sending it the message, and that sends it along to the broker, publishes it to the broker, who then forwards it to anything subscribed, in our case, the Pico. So that's the third thing that happens. And the fourth thing that you do is your dispatcher object, the GUI in our case, must have a specially named method, receive message, that receives messages. And MQTT, since that MQTT client knows the GUI, it knows to call GUI.receiveMessage whenever the MQTT client receives a message. So if the PC hears something that's come from the PC, it'll, in this case, just put that message up on a label. But it needs to have the specially named method, and it can do whatever it wants to do with the message when the message is received by the PC. So those are the 4 things, 1, 2, 3, 4, that your code has to do. We'll see the details of all of those in a later exercise, and in the next we'll also see the Pico as well.